this is my presentation for Public Health 2 on Jack in the Box E. coli breakout. So the first slide is about background information. So E. coli is actually short for Escherichia coli, and it's a disease commonly found in red meat, specifically in hamburger patties when the meat is undercooked and raw. So the E. coli breakout started many decades ago, and during this breakout, 2 to 7% of children and elderly people developed an additional disease called hemolytic uremic syndrome, also known as HUS, that is very deadly. The Jack in the Box E. coli breakout actually caused 35 deaths from the 22 outbreak cases that occurred. And the source of the outbreak was from one supplier with over 400 cows from 5 different slaughterhouses in 6 different states. So it was actually very difficult to really pinpoint the actual source, like the root of the E. coli breakout. So a couple strengths about the E. coli outbreak is that we were actually able to gain a lot of knowledge on how it was spread and take precautions and certain steps in order to minimize the spread of the disease and keep it under control. However, some weaknesses with that is that the use of antibiotics to grow livestock and promote health in those livestock actually led to more infectious bacterial strains that were difficult to defeat through the use of antibiotics. Some opportunities from this outbreak, there has actually been the creation of the inspection system called the Hazard Analysis and Critical Control Points, also known as the HACCP, to detect salmonella and E. coli in meats, and this has actually significantly decreased the rates of meat contamination and foodborne illnesses. A couple threats for this situation, though, was that the Supreme Beef, a Texas meat grinding company, actually shut down because it failed to meet 3 meat inspections, because almost 50% of their meat were contaminated with salmonella. However, through the help of the National Meat Association, this case was ruled in favor of the Supreme Beef Company, and the company the ruling for it to shut down was just too harsh, since they claimed that the contamination was through the cattle and not the company's fault. So E. coli is developed in cattle that typically feed on corn, and through the consumption of corn, it goes through their stomachs and it develops acid in their digestive systems. And in these stomach acids, E. coli is able to thrive. And when meat is packaged and sent off, often these meat packages come into close contact with cow manure and feces that were released from cows that lived in tight spaces that did not receive a lot of room for walking and maneuvering as they please and eating grass. So it made them more susceptible to developing E. coli. And within these manure and feces were contaminated with E. coli, and it made it much more easy for E. coli to spread through other meat packages when they are being transported. It was actually discovered that cattle that feed on grass and received a lot of wide range spaces to move were less likely to develop E. coli in their systems. So some alternative to the E. coli outbreak and some things that have been discovered was that there was a spray that could kill E. coli very effectively, as well as passing meat through steam cabinets and bags of hot water that kills most of the bacteria, as found in the USDA article written in 2000. In addition to that, we also have irradiation, which eliminates the bacteria effectively, and it's not as costly to these meat industry companies. So this is actually a very popular method. And last but not least, we also have the simplest solution, which is allowing the cattle to spend the last few days of their lives before being slaughtered to eat grass instead of corn and have a wide range where they can roam around as they please. And the purpose of doing that is to change the pH levels in their stomachs. But farm industries don't really like this idea because it is costly in order to transport all this hay, and having cows feed on their grass is also very costly. So some recommendations for helping businesses and meat industries and farms regulate E. coli spread is through having farms and companies prioritize is to do what is best and least expensive for them, and that's through irradiation, as I mentioned before. In addition to that, it's also important to educate the public on how to handle their raw foods so that they don't cross-contaminate, and so they are taking the necessary steps in order to properly cook and prepare their meat before, in between, and after eating. So some action plans include having farmers raise cattle and follow the rules and regulations closely and carefully, so that they are doing taking the appropriate steps to ensure that their cattle are not at risk of developing E. coli. In addition to that, making sure that when meat is being transported and distributed, that they're being handled properly, so that if there is a disease outbreak in that meat, it is more regulated and it doesn't spread to other meat products as easily. And also, with the help of the HACCP, meat contamination and foodborne illnesses can decrease significantly with proper inspection and ensuring that the meat that is being sent out is not contaminated for the public to consume. And last but not least, it's also about educating households on how to handle raw meat and learn about sanitary rules, as I mentioned before, and how to handle the raw meat and preparing it. So some finalizations and opinions. It is very important that these steps are followed to ensure that meat products are being regulated and inspected in order to prevent foodborne illnesses. In addition to that, food industry companies should know and understand that the public health and safety is the number one priority and number one concern instead of money. And it is important that everyone knows what they are putting in their plates at the dinner table is something they can enjoy both in their mouths and as well as in their stomachs. Thank you for viewing.